This week, we're resharing one of our favorite episodes of the Single Tracks podcast. If you've already heard this one, don't worry, because next week we'll be back with an all-new show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Single Tracks podcast. My name is Jeff, and today our guest is Mr. Gary Fisher. Gary is one of the founding fathers of mountain biking, selling some of the first bikes through a company called What Else? Mountain Bikes. He was a part of the repack race scene in the 1970s, and he's introduced countless innovations to the sport over the years. Thanks so much for joining us, Gary.
Sure. My pleasure.
So I want to start off talking about how mountain biking got started and your early involvement. So you started racing bikes on the road and the track at age 12. How'd you get into racing bikes at such an early age?
Well, I guess there was a local bike shop, and I'd hang out there a little bit. And the older guys, the 14 or 15-year-olds, they were all like into it. And I went on a ride with them, and they were saying, "You're too little. You can't come with us." And I just didn't pay attention. I just came, and they couldn't get rid of me. And at first they said, "Well, we'll make you a mascot." And I started crying. And they said, "Okay, we'll make you a full-on member." And it was just that whole thing of getting away from everything and having your freedom.
Yeah.
And then, some older kids, some other kids to have a good time with.
Yeah.
And that whole thing.
I find it interesting because right now everybody's, really excited about NICA, which is getting, younger people into mountain biking, competing in mountain biking.
Yeah.
And we kind of talk about it like it's a new thing, but yeah, that's why I was really interested in hear that you did that.
When I was 12, it was not cool at all. Seventh grade. And this girl sees me in my bike outfit, little girl socks, little wool shorts, the little jersey and everything. And she just said, "What a farmer." And she told all the other kids, and I just had to take it for about 6 months. It was not cool at all to be doing that. And that was in the 60s, and it was tiny, but the sport almost died. There were very few people riding bikes, unless you were a little kid or something like that. But that was then. This whole notion of off-road, goodness. Now, come on, off-road, that's over 120 years old. People first rode bicycles. It was all off-road. But ours was a notion of going fast off-road and having a lot of fun with it, because that was the scene in Marin County when I was like a teenager, when I was like into high school, was the Larkspur Canyon Gang. That was out of Redwood High School, and it was the people that invented the drum circle, believe it or not, in the 60s,
Wow.
The early 60s. And it was like going out on Mount Tam and having all this outdoors to ourselves. It was amazing,
Yeah.
And the bikes, I was a bike racer, serious. But these bikes we were using were just like balloon tire. Come on, something big and fat that you could like rip, have fun with. And the downside of it is that the brakes were horrible, and they didn't last very long. So you go out with 6 people and you come back with 3 of them dragging parts. But the whole idea was party in the woods, party in the woods, party in the woods,
Yeah.
And my involvement was I named the sport, called it mountain bikes. I did a lot of publicity behind it because my family comes out of Hollywood. And my mother taught me publicity, first for the bike race team, Velo Club Tamalpais, and then later on, for the company named Mountain Bikes and with Charlie Kelly. And we put on a very simple format race, downhill time trial, still using it today.
Yeah.
Hope Toledo. It's a pretty cool format. There are other formats that have come up that are incredible too. And what's happened, my involvement, I just loved this from the very beginning, saying, man, this is like limitless and like what people can do.
Yeah.
And the whole roller coaster thing and going crazy on a bike, that hadn't been done before.
Yeah.
People in the off-road were sedate and all that. We were not sedate. We were having fun. Larkspur Canyon Gang, we do Derby night. Derby night would be like a big wide place, out there in the woods that we knew about, nobody else did. And it'd be full moon night. And you start the first hour, you'd have cocktail hour, and we bring a lot of beer, and everybody drink a lot of beer for about the first hour, and you'd like ride around in this big clearing, and one hand on the beer, one hand on the bars, and try to say hello, and try to have your drinks and everything, and not spill the beer, because that wasn't cool. Then the second hour, you get the serious derbying, and the bikes were such where if you fell down, other people would run right over you, and ride over you and everything. Anyway, there's a big old party, and that wasn't the nighttime activity and parties in the city and things that these guys, Casey Sauna Band put together, who was a musician and everything. And then the off-road shenanigans. Yeah. Those guys, that's where I sort of figured out this was a lot of fun. And that was like when I was in high school. And that was like I was class of 68 at Redwood.
Okay.
And I was doing a lot of other things at the same time. I got thrown out of racing because my hair was too long. It was just over my ears. You couldn't believe it. And about the same time, I met this band called the Grateful Dead. And they had played a gig down in Pescadero, California, along with the Quicksilver Messenger Service. I'm sure you remember them if you're a 60s San Francisco sound person. Anyway, they played 3 nights in a row. Less than 100 people showed up. I mean, my God, these bands are popular. And you listen to like that old stuff of the Dead. I mean, oh, man. It was like they used Altic Lansing horns. They were these ridiculous, aluminum horns. Yeah. That was the PA system.
Wow.
And everything else just ran through. The drums were on their own. The bass was on its own. It was ridiculous. And but it was I was already doing a lot of hanging out with the whole Ken Kesey, the Merry Pranksters, and then the Hells Angels.
Oh, wow.
Because we'd see them, in La Honda, California. We'd be riding our bikes, and they'd be at Kesey's place there, and we'd all stop and check it out. And then later on, we'd be down in Pescadero and in San Gregorio, and they'd come on their motorcycles, and they'd check us out, on our bikes. The little skinny kids, like 18-year-olds, like 15, 18, and the ringleader of our gang was this Larry Walpole, and he was an old Englishman out of East London, had the heavy Cockney accent, worked for Pan Am as a mechanic, and was just like great and hilarious. And we go over to his house and read all the old bike magazines, like cycling, British Cycling Weekly, the UK, and then also Miroir de Cycliste. It was like a French magazine. It was like I never saw anybody ride a bike in Europe until I was in my 20s, because there were no video at the time.
Right.
And it was like it wasn't on TV ever, so you'd never see people doing it. And anybody you'd see out riding at the time in the 60s, you'd stop them and say, "Who are you, man? Let's exchange phone numbers, and let's work together," and all that.
You're connecting a lot of dots here, for me anyway. The Larkspur Canyon Gang, first of all, that predates Repack, and you're saying this was like a high school group essentially.
Well, yeah, I got out of high school and I moved in with the Dead over in the Haight. And then I worked for them. I worked for the Airplane. And then came a thing called Altamont. That was in December of 1969. And we hosted it was the Rolling Stones. So Sam Cutler of the Rolling Stones, Ron Racco from the Grateful Dead, Bill Thompson from the Jefferson Airplane, and Sonny Barger. They were all in a meeting on this house, in Ron Racco's house on Sacramento Street. I was there. And, I was a kid. I worked, I was 17, 18. I did light shows, and I worked for a company called Grand Ultimate Steward Company, or GUS. And we used to take care of the Dead. We used to take care of the Airplane. To see all this shit go down, you couldn't believe it, man. And that was a mess, and 4 people died at that concert.
Oh, wow.
Everybody left town. So I moved out of town, moved back to Marin County, to Kentfield, with a band called New Riders of the Purple Sage. They were an offshoot of the Grateful Dead. They were psychedelic country western. And we all lived in Kentfield. I took care of the house, man. I had free rent, and I started riding my bike a whole bunch again. And I ran into Charlie Kelly. Everybody was telling me, "Oh, you got to see this guy, Charlie. He's just like you, man." And we both had orange colnagos. We both had long hair. And he was a roadie for a band called the Sons of Champlin. I met him, and it's like, "Hey, let's move in together. Let's have a pad. Let's do a thing. So we moved in together, and I introduced Charlie to the fat tire thing, and we went out. Oh, the first ride we did on single speeds. And the next week I'm saying, hey, I got to put gears on this thing. Mm-hmm. And I got to put, brakes on this thing. So within about a month's time, I put together my original clunker. Then the next month I put one together for Charlie. This was in September of 1974. And later on in December was a cyclocross race I rode. I rode my cross bike. And I met the guys from Cupertino. And they had their fat tire bikes. I said, that's cool. I did not get any ideas from those guys. They didn't get any ideas from me.
Yeah.
Did it spontaneously on their own.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There's other people too. Victor Vincenti, who was Michael Hiltner. I knew of Michael Hiltner in 1964, 65. He won the National Road Championships in 1965 in L.A. That was the first road championships they'd had in over 25 years. Everything else was on the track all that time. Uh-huh. So it was in Northern California. Southern California was a resurgence of road racing in the 60s, in the mid to late 60s. And then came the 70s. 73 was a gas war, and things went nuts. I mean, it was like bikes went from 4.7 million sales in 1 year to 15 million.
Whoa.
In 74. It was crazy, And everybody had to have a bike, and it was the bike craze. And so we started Velo Club Tamalpais at that time. It was and that was with Charlie. We'd already been doing, we started doing the repack races. Mm-hmm. And it was just because it was fun,
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, so much of that story too just seems to connect with mountain biking today. I mean, the biker gang sort of mentality, mountain biking is definitely got like more of an edge to it than road biking and the, to the beer drinking, I mean, that's a big part of our culture now. And
right. It's
just really fascinating that has endured, and that's what separates us. I mean, people, like you mentioned, people had been riding bikes off road for a long time, but this was something new.
There's a number of things, but you take the history was funny. It's like, okay, I made, the original bikes you rode in repack, they were pretty laid back. I mean, it's 68-degree head. They're really heavy wheels. I mean, steel rims, so they were really heavy duty, and the tires are super heavy duty. Mm-hmm. They didn't flat, and you can run them down to like 20 PSI. We do that all the time.
Oh, wow.
And that was sort of our suspension. Mm-hmm. And it's really funny. I mean, then we went the other way. I mean, we made light frames, and, it's really funny. You take Joe Breeze's first bike that he made, mm-hmm. very first one. That was like 36 pounds, 38 pounds.
Right.
It had steel rims on it. It had caliper brakes on it. I mean, cantilever brakes. Those brakes are sort of worthless in the wet. Mm-hmm. So it's an evolution. But where we went, I mean, like the bike I had for winning repack. That thing, the drum brakes on that thing were ridiculously powerful. They were like, they were wonderful. They were like one finger brakes. They were amazing. And there was a tandem drum brake, so it had a lot of power and really big cables. Then we went to cantilever brakes, and when you had steel rims, they were sort of ridiculous. Then the BMX guys came along with the alloy rims because they had the cruiser class, and the alloy rims were like so much lighter. They were 19 ounces each, where the old steel rims were 55 ounces each.
Wow. That's more than 3 pounds.
They were amazing, as far as gyroscopic stability. Right. And then they were like really rounded on the edges of the rims. So like you couldn't rim pinch very easy on them. They were amazing. Mm-hmm. They worked pretty well for the intended use downward. Climbing, it was horrible, so all of a sudden, 1979, we start this company, Mountain Bikes, and we can put together a bike that's like 27 pounds. That bike does not go downhill like the old bikes do, mm-hmm. believe me. But it sure does climb. And then the races start, and all the racing and everything. And we get into this lighter and lighter and lighter thing, super light. The race is won and lost on the climb. So, and then comes John Tomac, and he is riding a 73-degree head angle, and he dropped bars. And Charlie Cunningham had drop bars, but his bars started from a pretty high position. So they didn't go down that far. And the same with like Scott Nichols was running drop bars. But it was all about climbing and, make it to the top fast and making all your time there and everything.
Yeah.
And the bikes just started to reflect that. And, thank God it's come full circle.
Yeah. Well, but it's only come full circle in my mind just within the last few years. I mean, we're still seeing that evolution back toward the original. I was talking to Joe Breeze about those early bikes that he made and, talking about a 68-degree head tube angle. I mean, that's what everybody's going to now for like a trail bike, and it's kind of like we're going back to that, and the tires too, that you were saying how the old tires could run them really low pressures. And it's like the last few years, people are saying, geez, it's actually kind of nice running them at 20 PSI. Let's see what we can do to make that happen.
Right. And you look at what they're doing with all the inserts on the down DH tires and everything. They're finally getting to a place where you can have your cake and eat it too. There was a period of time where like people were running like 40 PSI, 45 all the time because they were just worried about rim pinch. That was a big, and they were getting to be horrible bikes to ride, and it was before, we got into really good suspension, and the first suspension was, really squirrely and awful.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you were one of the first to add suspension to a mountain bike. What did people think about it at that time? Did they think it was a good thing? Did they think it was weird? Did they think it was cheating?
I had to argue with my sales guys tooth and nail. They were like, nobody's going to buy that. And this was the Mount Tam in 1991. And it was basically a suspension-ready design that I did with Paul Turner, and we were the first ones to have a bike that came with a shock fork. Mm-hmm. And my sales guys were saying, look, man, it adds $400 to the cost, to the sales point of the bike. It adds a couple of pounds, and everybody was in a weight war.
Yeah.
And they just like, no. And then we came out with it, and 6 months later, they were super happy.
Yeah.
And then the next year we did the bike with Mert Lau, RS1. And that bike was like crazy. It was like too far ahead of its time. It was like, man, we had a disc brake, and it didn't work.
Were people confused about the bike? Were they thinking like, is this a motorbike or is this, because suspension had been around on motorcycles, but was it weird to people to see it on a mountain bike?
Oh, completely. Well, there was that big divide because you had guys, like Joe and like Tom Ritchie that are all like hardcore roadies, from the, and they're looking at that and saying, oh, no, can't we do something else instead of that, making it look like a motorcycle? They say, oh, that looks like a motorcycle. And at the same time, I mean, like I've always been into embracing people from other places, and that's what Mert Lau represented to me. I mean, I love working with Mert. Mm-hmm. He just had a big, wild, open imagination, and that bike was a huge lesson to us. We learned so much through that thing, and we made 750 of them. We sold them all. People that bought them were early adopters, total pioneers, and I don't care about the naysayers. I mean, it's like cross-country mountain biking now has technicalities in it, and so do the bikes. And that's because your friend right here, went to the UCI, and you want to, in the act of getting them to accept the 29er, because 29ers were illegal until I had them change the rule.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they said to me, hey, we don't want to have, 29-inch be allowed, 700C, we don't want people bringing cross bikes. I said, look, stop making mountain bike courses that are cross courses.
Right. That's a good solution.
Make them mountain bike courses. And so they did. And so they are, and it's because that's what people want to ride. They want to ride stuff like this because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The technical thing of like, wow, I clean that, there's always been a lot of fun on a mountain bike. I mean, and this thing, you can make a course faster and faster. And then what do you got? You got a road course, you got a dirt crit or something like that,
Yeah.
It's not mountain biking. So I'm totally happy with what's been going on. We've got choice, all kinds of crazy stuff out there.
Right.
And we've been perfecting it and make it work. I mean, it's like we've got the ability to make these huge tires that are relatively light, incredibly tough. And then we take the suspension and tune it to that setup, because that's a different setup, and go through all the stuff and do it thoroughly.
Yeah.
And do it correctly. I love having the resource to be able to do these things now. So, you're going to be able to get a bike that really suits what your needs are, what you as a rider likes, groks. I mean, come on. and that's the funny thing. I mean, we're not all about just time. I mean, we still got the downhill is always fascinating because it's judged by time, but man, we got all these other events now that it's just not always just flat out time,
Yeah. Well, you were involved in a lot of the competition stuff in the 90s, right? Working with race teams and...
I worked with Norba for a long time, almost 20 years, which has been sort of gone through not the best of times. I mean, we made the biggest mistake at the Olympics in Atlanta. We hired a really cheap production crew. And at the same time, it cost like crazy. We're 46 cameras,
wow.
For that event. It was crazy, the costs. And then the event was horrible, It was just, and it came down to the course more than anything.
Yeah, I've seen videos of that. I'm based here in Atlanta, so we do ride those trails now, and they're completely different. If you look at the videos, there's like a real grainy video on YouTube people can look up, but the trail, I'm using air quotes here, is it's like a highway. I mean, it just was flat and wide open. And I suppose that was to make it more exciting because they thought people would be passing and things like that.
Well, the most incredible thing now, I mean, we didn't spend any money. That was the problem. Now it's like they're purpose-built trails. Mm-hmm. Those are the most incredible things. That's like people ask me, but technically, what's the most incredible thing that happened in the last 10 years? The trails.
Oh.
Come on. You think about how many trails have been built for mountain bikers, by mountain bikers. That's what makes it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what really makes the whole thing. And it makes the whole sport go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what would you say drives mountain bike design more, or what has historically? I mean, is it the competition side, or is it the, let's just keep making bikes more fun and making them so people can enjoy trails?
Well, it's both, come on. I mean, the competition guys they're racking their brains every weekend, to try to come up with something better. And that's more a thing of refinement. And then just the people of hey, man, I got a bigger joke than you do. Watch this, right? And what are we doing? We're pulling each other's chain, trying to have a good time. And man, when you got something that's undeniably just we're having huge fun and everything, it's just unstoppable. Right. So that's what we're always trying to identify and to try and serve. And we do, we've done maybe almost too good of a job of it, in that we make all these different permutations of bikes, 1 million permutations of bikes. And not enough people to tell you, just ride this one. You'll be so happy. You can't stand it. You know what I'm saying? We get too hung up in the decision. But hey, we're working on that too. I mean, it's a huge part of what we're doing right now as a company, is working on the way that we present our bikes and that we show people. And it's more about, hey, you can do this, or this is possible, or this is a lot of fun, instead of the nut and bolt part of it, just this is this type of tire and that type of thing, because really it's 90% of people in the business to get excited about all that technical stuff, and only 30% of humans get excited about that. The rest of them are going come on.
Yeah, I mean, you're selling an experience, people don't want to get weighed down in the technical details. They just want to, most of us just want to go out and have fun.
At the same time, you don't want to be a fool. You don't want to be a chump. You want to know your stuff, right?
Right.
You don't want to get rolled on the thing, because you can get, everybody knows, I mean, you get into something that's being sold off because this isn't going anywhere, this is the supply of this is going away, and this is a dead end.
Yeah.
That's what we experience all the time with a lot of electronica. It's you get into something and everybody's got stuff, old media, electronica media. It's oh man, I don't even think I can play that on anything.
Right. Yeah. A friend just handed me a CD-ROM with some photos from a ride. And I was I don't know what to do with this. I'm sorry.
It's oh man, really? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And 10 years ago, it's a little bit, well, of course.
Right. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about the first carbon fiber mountain bikes, bike culture, and some of the challenges the industry is facing. Stay tuned. You can't see me, but I'm wearing an awesome Singletracks hat right now. It's actually the reason my voice sounds so amazing. Okay, so maybe not, but you never know until you get a hat for yourself. Go to shop.singletracks.com to find Singletracks hats, t-shirts, stickers, tubular headwear, and can coolers. Shipping is free within the USA, and your purchase helps support the Singletracks podcast. That's shop.singletracks.com, and thank you for your support. So you were one of the first to experiment with carbon fiber mountain bike frames. So what were some of the challenges involved in that in the early days?
Well, the early days was trying to get those big companies to like really do something that really worked. It was hard. I mean, our first carbon fiber experience was with Toray, which was a big Japanese company, and they still make a ton of carbon fiber for the industry and for bikes and everything. And that was great. But man, we only made 7 bikes at the end of the day.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't reality, and I think about Trek and how there was a certain racer that won 7 Tour de France's, and people don't even say his name. And he brought a lot of goodness to the bike industry, and that a lot of bike sales, a lot of people were excited about bikes. The New York Times would carry bike racing every single day. And so would all the other media and everything. And like it or not, bikes were big there for a while. And he won his first tour, and he won it on one of our carbon fiber bikes. And traditionally, you'd make 500 bikes and say, here's the replica, you can buy this for a lot of money, and we'd sell them out. And we decided to make 20,000 bikes because we knew people would like it, although it was a crazy new category, $5,000 to $10,000 bicycle, right? It was a totally whole new place. And people got into it because the bike actually worked. It actually felt good, I mean, I had other, early carbon bikes. Like I had a Calfia by Greg LeMond by Calfee, really early on. And that bike was a cool, concept. And it rode pretty nice. But, man, it was dead. And it wasn't that light. It was amazing. I had an aluminum frame that was lighter than that one. It was crazy. I mean, everything has evolved, and it keeps going. And that's the thing we did is we built a lot of those bikes and we sold them all. And instead of a dealer being able to sell 1 or maybe 2, they sold like 10 or 20.
Wow. So there was a lot of demand for that. I mean, were people skeptical though?
No, because we had a guarantee, and our guarantee's always been good. We got a great reputation for guarantee. So they weren't skeptical. A skepticism is like, wow, do you trust carbon? Right. That was back then. And we stepped in it in a big way. We said, no, your lifetime guarantee, just like all of our other bikes. And people said, okay, you guys, you replaced my last bike really well. So
was there any worry on your end? I mean, having not done that before, did you all do a lot of the research?
No. We had always done it. And we had a few crazy guys in the company that said, we really believe this will make a superior bike. And it didn't sell for beans for us until that one particular guy won a Tour de France on it. It's just like having a downhill bike, that there's a certain downhiller that we had him for a while, Specialized had him for a while, and now he sells somebody else's bike, and man, it sells really well.
Right.
That all works. I mean, it's totally irrational and unreasonable, but boy, it works.
Yeah.
It works for them. Oof. That's a good downhiller. That's a good road rider. Or what? It was entertainment. Whatever. It worked, But we stepped up to the plate, and we made it a real thing because it wasn't a real thing. I mean, before that, it was like, it was a really nice bike. When I started this, you could buy a full Campagnolo Cinelli for $200, $199, full on. Okay, and then it was like in the 70s, when we started mountain bikes, the company, our bike in 1979 sold for $1,320. It was a lot. You could buy a full-on Colnago with full Campagnolo, And because Campagnolo at the time, there was a lot of gray market going on because Campagnolo would sell direct, give groups directly to the teams, the race teams, and then the race teams would sell them for whatever they felt like. Ooh. Anyway, you could buy that for $450. You could get a Ben Sirota, a beautiful custom bike, for $995, complete.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy. And our bike was $1,320. It was beautiful. And we'd say to people, well, you don't want a cheap parachute. And they bought them like crazy. And it was and they were beautiful. We stood behind them and we took the perception of what a bike cost to a different place.
Yeah.
And Trek did the same thing with the carbon bike. And you need to do that every now and again in order to reset the whole industry. Because come on, man, I'm sorry, but bikes in this great grand scheme of people's stuff, a really, really nice bike made in the way of NASA or the way of Formula One. And what can you buy in that category? It costs 10 grand, 15 grand, and people will spend that kind of money on a vacation at the drop of a hat. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The kind of money that's out there these days is crazy. At the same time, I guess our president's going to make the price of bikes go up.
Sounds like that's a real possibility.
Is it ever? That's going to hurt a little.
So you alluded to some of the innovations and things that are happening right now. What are you most excited about in terms of the new technology and things that are happening with bikes over the last few years?
I guess, there's a lot of progress in every area. I think the thing I am most excited about is making the dreams come true. And the guy who did that before us was Steve Jobs and Apple, because all the computer guys would say, hey, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, you can do that. And for the average person, it didn't come true.
Yeah.
They weren't geek enough to be able to pull it off. And Apple pulled it off, and it was a retail interface. And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's like being able to have a place of respectfulness for anybody,
mm-hmm.
and of help, and of information. And, it's the old thing, the old Pogo cartoon. We have met the enemy and he is us, right? It's like having bad attitude, making people unhappy.
Right.
That's not where we're going.
Yeah.
No, we're trying the happy machine. We like to say this is the world's happiest invention. And I do believe that.
Yeah, there's a good case for that.
I do believe there's a real big case for that. And let me sit down with you and explain why. This is the greatest thing I've ever discovered. I'd love to share it with you, and you've come to the right place.
Well, that's really interesting that you bring up Steve Jobs and Apple. This is a parallel that I've seen in my mind anyway. And some of the other guys, Joe Breeze and Tom Ritchie, I asked them similar questions about the place. The Bay Area. Is there something about that place where these ideas sort of germinate more easily? I just find it fascinating that mountain biking and, a lot of the great tech booms, have come from the same place.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like Joop Sprant, the guy that taught us a lot about basic bikes, how they're built, why they're built that way. Now, he worked for Hewlett-Packard, and you can also see a placard that dedicated to him on the Stanford Linear Accelerator. And this is like typical, of the mix of knowledge, study, and then some wild new things. Like Stuart Brandt, he did the Whole Earth Catalog.
Right.
I did the bicycle section for the Whole Earth Catalog. And these were people that I met through the Dead and through Ken Kesey and his group of people. These guys, it's always been the attitude of well, why not? We can do that.
Yeah.
And that's been seeped in the Bay Area for the longest time. It was like that whole thing with the Altamont. That was takeoff on Woodstock. And Woodstock was about, wow, man, we have got amplification and we could create this mega concert. That couldn't be done before. I think we take it for granted.
Yeah.
That all this is possible.
That's really cool and really hopeful for the industry as well.
Well, for the industry, though, I will tell you, it's like part of it is this interface that we make better shops and better ways that we supply people and take care of people, better information. Okay, that's one thing. The others are with the kids, the school kids,
right.
the NICA thing. We want to be in every single high school in the United States. It's 179,000 high schools.
Wow.
We want to be in every single one.
That's ambitious.
And then, And then as far as like, we're on a program too. We're trying to talk to a lot of city leaders about doing more mountain bike routes in the cities. And especially like, creating a network that's like safe routes to school, that goes through buildings, over streets, sort of dominates the second floors.
Dirt routes to school.
Yeah, like Ray's Indoor Mountain Bike Park, man, where you got like a challenge and then you got to go around all the time, a feature and a go around, because we know now it helps kids calm down and be more focused when they're in class. And people that, it's all about making the cities a place where you'd actually want to raise your kids.
That's a really cool goal. I believe that mountain bikes are a part of that for sure.
Why not? Let's have fun with the thing. It's like, let's rig the city so it's like, it's actually fun.
Yeah. It's like a playground. Yeah, I like it.
Well, yeah, and a really healthy one at that, and it's like, because it's all about taking those things that are good for you and making them a lot of fun.
Yeah. So we started at the beginning talking a lot about mountain bike culture in the early days and sort of how it's evolved. Would a modern mountain biker feel welcome among that first group of riders from Repack?
Definitely. They just have to lay aside their, there were always those within the group that were competitive. Always will be, But then there was like, hey, it was like, are you having fun right now? That's always the question you got to ask,
So yeah, as long as you have an open mind and you want to have fun, then, it seems like that's kind of the only requirement to be a part of that.
No, it wasn't uptight roadies. That was for sure. It was like the basic tenets is like everybody gets a place. Everybody has a finish time. Everybody, gets respect. The last finisher last person in is just as important as the first one, and the fast experience is just over faster. That's it.
Yeah. Well, obviously you see a lot of opportunity with mountain bikes and mountain biking in the future. Are there any challenges that you see that we're facing right now or that maybe we're going to face in the future?
Yeah, mostly my generation that doesn't understand. And it just like, we're dying off though.
Don't understand in what way? Like trail access or?
Any of that. They just think it's all like for the betterment of like just a few people having thrills, and the thrills aren't fun.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of that here in Marin County. It's difficult. They just don't understand, what we're doing. But fortunately, the kids do. That's what's amazing is that with NICA, we don't have to bribe the kids to be on the team.
Right.
The teams wind up being bigger than the football teams. Football's in decline a bit, but overall athletics and especially girls athletics are coming up, and we have more and more evidence that this is really good and good quality, and that it's not that in the long term we save money by doing this. Especially we get the kids to ride to school and learn their own responsibility and everything. So it's a movement. It's a grassroots movement, and the grassroots movements are defined by these are things that people would do left on their own. It's not like the big bad bike coalitions are putting this together, which is another really funny thing. I was at the NICA convention, a couple of months ago, and I was talking there, and I said, "Hey guys, I'll tell you, a really good source of money in the cities is all the rideshare guys, scooter guys, all these guys like Bird. They're evaluated at $2 billion right now."
Jeez.
They're talking about, these guys are talking about, I love what these guys say. They say, why do we have all these cars in the city? Why don't we have, separate scooter bike lanes from the cars? We'll even pay for them. They're even saying that. These are the guys that are going to make this crazy stuff come true.
Yeah. Is anybody in the bike industry, you think, doing that as well? It seems like Trek is definitely involved.
Well, we throw more money than any other bike company, okay? And I forget, at one point we figured it out. We were doing like 7 times as much as number 2, okay? Let me tell you, These other guys, Bird and these other guys, they got real money. They're going to do like 50 times as much as we do. That's going to have an effect. I mean, I'm just talking about the size of the money. They're much bigger than we are.
Yeah. Well, it's like that's baked into a lot of these business models now. I mean, do you think were bike companies thinking about that in those early days? I mean, were you thinking about that with mountain bikes and with your own label?
Well, bikes all the time. Like all the time. And as a kid riding around saying it's so easy for me to ride around. And people are so stupid in their cars. Mm-hmm. And then they're unhealthy, and this thing is so dangerous. This is crazy. And polluting and everything. And it's just a big scam, the whole thing. In a lot of ways it is. And you go through the history of the whole thing, they really had a lot of imagination, a lot of will, and they made us dependent on automobiles 100% in the United States. It's the world's most expensive transit system. When you go to like the cost of moving an individual around. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't work. We get traffic jams that are like ridiculous and people don't like to do things. It's the bike thing. When you travel around, you go to other countries that have an evolved bike infrastructure. It's like, wow, this is incredible, because a lot of cities couldn't exist the way they are in Northern Europe. A lot of, Amsterdam, all these, cities in Holland and Sweden and all these places, they could not exist with the density they have. It's like going to Tokyo. I mean, there are 20 million people in Tokyo. It's one of the largest cities on earth. And they use subways and bikes and walking like you can't believe. Yeah. There are bikes everywhere, From an engineering standpoint, that city would be absolutely impossible without those three things, And ours is, we went on a program in the States of getting rid of pedestrian and bicycle and and transit. Starting in 1932. General Motors, it was Chairman Sloan. He was a genius of General Motors, and he formed a consortium with Standard Oil, Mack Truck, Firestone Tire. They bought up 87 different rail entities in the United States. They put them all out of business. They would go into receivership, and then for forgiveness of debt, they would turn over the right-of-way to the municipality under the proviso that the tracks be torn out, they be paved over, and all the trolley cars burned. Now, in 1947, the U.S. government found them all guilty of a conspiracy. They fined the individuals $1 each and the corporations $5,000 each. And remember, at the time, we had a slogan: what's good for General Motors is good for the United States. Now, in 1956, Dwight Eisenhower, our president, spent more money than ever before had been spent, and actually than ever has been spent since, adjusted for inflation, on one thing. That's the interstate freeway system. We're having a hard time repairing the thing right now, It doesn't move people around so much. So it's like we made a heavy-duty investment in that, and for us to back out of it, it's sort of painful. You realize this when you travel in Europe, go to Asia, and especially not China. Oh, man, they put in a ton of high-speed rail. They realized that, cars were not going to be the answer, and we're just going to create more of a pollution thing. And they're trying to get a hold of their whole pollution because they're trying to, create a good environment for people to raise their families. And we're going the other direction. We're saying, nah.
Yeah. Well, cars seem to be a part of mountain biking culture today. I mean, for most people, when they imagine going for a mountain bike ride, they imagine, I load the bike up in the car and then I drive 30 minutes or whatever to the trailhead. But was that something that you did in the early days, or were you all able to ride, to all the trails? I mean, was there a lot of driving involved?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Come on. I mean, I was a hardcore. I'd say I'm going to ride to everything, right? But then good old Fred Wolf, I mean, he made the thing happen because he had a truck. And he'd take people here and there. No, it did, and so I'm not going to say we were pure. We had a lot of attitude about bikes and cars and the whole thing like that, but no, we weren't pure. No way. And me, I mean, it's like, come on. I've been sponsored by Subaru, by Saab. 20 years I had a free car. So I'm going to complain,
It's a nice perk.
It's a real nice perk, but it's like, am I going to complain? Well, it's sort of like the car brought us all kinds of good things, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, Chairman Sloan was a genius doing what he did, but too much is too much, That's all. Cars, as we know them, do not belong in our cities. Anyway, I could go on about this.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you're passionate about it, and the transportation thing. I mean, that's a theme that we hear from a lot of people in your position in the industry, that this is a thing that's happening, and the bikes are a great solution, and especially when it comes to electric bikes. And so what are your thoughts on that as it pertains to mountain biking? Do you think electrics have a good place in mountain biking, or how does that sort of fit in?
I like a good, clean, pure bike. And then again, an acoustic bike. And the electric though, man, it's way too much fun. That's the problem. Because you can, you equip the bike with more heavy duty stuff because you're not worried about the weight so much. Mm-hmm. And man, what a ripping bike that thing is. And it's still, this is the world's most efficient motorized transport, right? And the guys in the Forest Service, they're starting to eat them up because they're quiet.
Right.
They don't make about the same amount of noise as the wind rustling the leaves, right? Mm-hmm. And they like them quiet because you can hear your victim. They want to go on search and rescue, and they can hear their victim. They can't do that with a helicopter or a motorcycle or an ATV. And then it's like, it is the cheapest way for you to get around your property, and in a lot of cases, the fastest. So we're actually selling a lot of electric mountain bikes to the Forest Service guys. So it's like, and then it's like, they're not like the big problem, man. You got like motorcycles and bikes don't mix so well because the moto guy has a full face helmet. Mm-hmm. He's making a lot of noise. Yeah. He doesn't hear you, man. He can't hear you. And a guy on an electric bike can actually hear you yammering and stuff and riding along. An electric bike is quiet enough where you can hear somebody on a regular bike. So we're also watching what happens in Europe because they've been around there for 10 years, electric mountain bike, and there are places where there's lots of them. Mm-hmm. And they're just suffering sometimes from there's a lot of mountain bikers. So then you got to direct things and make things and deal with the pressure. But it's funny. I mean, we had our Marin County Board of Supervisors had a meeting a couple of months ago, they announced a meeting and said, we plan to ban electric mountain bikes from the water district and all the territory out here. And so a bunch of old people showed up to ride electric mountain bikes and said, hey, we've been doing this for a few years and we don't bother anybody. Board of Supervisors said, okay, we're not going to ban them. And in fact, we're going to allow them. I'm telling you, the old people run this place called Marin County. There's a bunch of old people here. And there are other counties. It's the oldest population in the whole Bay Area. And the population is old. And I go to other places. I go to the southeast of the United States. I go to the Midwest. And people are so open to mountain bikes and realize all the goodness it does for kids. Yeah. And right here, it's funny. I mean, all 7 high schools have got a team. So this is, and it's really funny. There's an underground movement in the Water District, which is the biggest district, and all the other guys, the Rangers, the young Rangers, they say, I look the other way, man. No, seriously, they do. And the old guys in there are the guys that want to nail everybody.
Right. Well, fortunately, a lot of the younger guys, I see this all the time where people who started riding in the 80s or the 90s, now they're the guys who are in charge of some of these groups. And, that's changing and it's going to change. It's inevitable, just based on demographics. But what would you make of the sort of the debate among mountain bikers about whether e-bikes have a place within mountain biking or not? Does that kind of bother you that people are sort of choosing sides in the debate?
Well, people are people. People are going to talk and everything. One of my very best friends from a long time ago came out totally against electric e-bikes. And I told him, I don't care what you say, you're always going to be my friend.
That's a good way to look at it.
And we totally respect each other, but it's sort of cooling out, the whole thing. And I think it's definitely going to benefit trail building. There'll be more trail building, not less.
Yeah. Well, do you think it seems like a lot of people are opposed to it because it's unfamiliar to them and it's new. Is that another one of those people things, or are mountain bikers more guilty of?
No, No, that's just people being people. That's people being people, and I've seen it all the time. I mean, it's like some of my best racers have been so adamant they don't want to try some new things out. I got to hold their hand. I got to, rub their hand, and talk to them and talk to them and do this. And then finally, after 6 months, they might try something. And it's really funny. It's all over the place. You'd think it would be this way for this type of person, that type of person. It's all over the place. That's okay. And a lot of that has been because they hadn't actually ridden one or seen the reactions. They hadn't done anything. So it takes time, and we see this. I mean, it's like I was saying, like when we put a shock fork on there. I mean, a unit crown fork, that was the look. And to put this thing on there that was like, it looked like a Bontrager fork, but then it had these stanchions with rubber booties and all this crazy stuff on it. It's like, that looks strange. And then 3-4 years later, that looked normal. And the other setup looked strange.
Yeah.
And that's just the evolution of things and how things go, and it's like, man, the way bikes look today is really different. And so from even like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I love it. It's like the thing with carbon, and with hydroforming of aluminum. I mean, 15 years ago, we couldn't sell a curved tube bike to save our soul. And now it's like they all have curves and shapes, and they're beautiful, and they're well worked out because you work it all out on the computer, and you really can see what's happening. It's like we used to have to build things and then destructively test it or ride it and all this stuff. And it would take so long, and there was so little, everything was so conservative, and it's really opened up. I love it,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, clearly you're someone who's willing to embrace change and to try new things, and you've had a lot of success because of it. So hopefully that'll be a model for others to sort of follow in the years to come.
Well, we embrace change, but we try to do it responsibly. It was like way back in the day, 1980, we had an opportunity to use 700C or 650B tires. We had some from Finland. We had a supply we could get our hands on. They were like 44 millimeter. And really, if we had really worked on it hard, we could have gotten some custom tires made. But man, every bike shop in the United States had a 26 by 2125 tire in it, a Uniroyal Knobby for $11.95. And this tire we would have had to have sold for $130 each. And nobody was selling tires for that expensive. It was like you make decisions based on practicality sometimes. You have to have tires available. I mean, God, you're going to make a bike that like the tires are like really expensive. Only I supply them, and you can't get them anywhere else. That sounds not good, And you take what happened when the 650B, hit a 27.5, man. It's like everybody stood up and said, okay, we're not going to be silly like we were with the 29er, and we're going to supply these things. And it's like, boom, I can get these easily. This is great. And I can get a huge variety of these things. I love it, So I like that we've got more variety and everything. I like the 27 plus size a lot. I mean, it's a 29er almost on the outside. It's pretty, but man, that thing's got plushness and everything. Then it's like, our 29 plus, that's almost 31 inches. And it's like 100 years ago, the two most popular sizes in bikes and everything was off-road was 28 and 32 inches. Of course, they're sort of narrow and everything, but what do they know about that? I mean, the outside diameter and everything, it has a lot to do with sort of the speed that a bike handles at. The gyroscopic is a combination of both the gyroscopic stability thing going on and then just how long the wheelbase gets stretched out to and everything, especially the rear ends and everything. So it's funny. I mean, diameter is one thing, and then the whole thing with width and plushness. Oh man, that's a whole new place that we've been able to take it. It's like you used to be able to do that, but it was all the high quality stuff was in road and cyclocross bikes and all that way back in the day. And then finally, we're getting better and better tires and like 26 and all that. And now it's like, wow, you got all these different crazy sizes that you can play around with.
Yeah.
So as a designer, it's really great to be able to have the resource, to play around with it. I'm glad people aren't afraid to play with stuff now. That's like what I'm proudest of, is like I sort of broke down some doors and let people like run inside, and now they're trying things even I couldn't have imagined. I love that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, you've been such a huge influence on the industry and the culture. Thank you for sharing this story with us and for letting us know what's going on with mountain biking today.
Thanks to everybody that dedicates themselves, their bodies, their hearts, their souls into this beautiful sport. And let's go out and make the sport better. And let's go out and teach our kids about it. And let's go out and knock down the institutions that say no.
Well, you can keep up with the latest news from Gary Fisher and the Trek brand at trekbikes.com. And you can follow Gary on Twitter at Gary_Fisher. And be sure to subscribe to the Single Tracks podcast so you don't miss more interviews like this one. We'll talk to you again next week. Peace.